Welcome to the new edition of the Pool of Life podcast with me, Neil Meekin, and my special guest today is Dr. Jens Thomas, the other half of the dynamic duo that is Farm Urban. And so we're walking through the beautiful Dibbinsdale Woods on the Wirral near Spittal. And if you've never come to this place before and you live on Merseyside, it's an absolute must. It's a bit of a hidden gem, and the birds are singing, and it's a beautiful afternoon here in the woods. So I'll just introduce how me and Jens first became acquainted. So as you know, if you've listened to this podcast before, I've interviewed Dr. Paul Myers, who's the other half of the partnership that is Farm Urban. And there was always the intention to interview both, because they're both absolutely incredible human beings. Same in some respects, but very different in others, as you'll hear in the podcast. So I first met Jens through a mutual contact called Claire Lewis, who was the previous interviewee. And we met, I think it was we met on Renshaw Street in a Chinese, and we had a really good conversation. Again, just absolutely clicked as soon as we met. And then we met up again and we went to a cinema night at FACT around soil and the importance of soil. And again, just bonded even more to the point then where we started working together. And then you introduced me to Paul, and it all went from there. And it's been a ride ever since.
Yeah.
We've been to Italy together. Yeah. So welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a genuine pleasure to be here with you and to be in this amazing space. I've spent a fair bit of time on the Wirral, but this is a completely new discovery for me, and it's absolutely stunning. It's such a beautiful, powerful place.
Well, this has always been the intention, where as many episodes as I possibly could is to do these interviews in nature. And with Paul, it was in Wirral Woods in South Liverpool. Here we are on the Wirral, where you're currently staying, although you're now living down on the south coast in Hove.
In Brighton, just on the border.
Just on the border, yeah. And we can talk about that in the interview, about that move down there. But first of all, who is Jens Thomas? Give me a little bit of a sense of like who you are, and it's probably fair to call you, you might swear when I say this, but Dr. Jens Thomas. But who are you? Like, tell me a bit about like where you're from originally and a bit of your story, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm still kind of learning that, and still kind of exploring. Still, I think that's part of life's journey, is to work out who we really are and what we're here for, and what informed us where we came from. But I was born in Wales. I grew up by the sea, just outside of Lanswick Major, till I was about 5, and then my parents moved to St Albans, which is just north of London. So
very Roman.
Yeah, very Roman, and very, very kind of middle class, very moneyed, very status orientated, and I really, really did not like the kind of the whole vibe, and the kind of there was something that really didn't sit with me about the whole place. So I was, as soon as I could, I kind of left, and I'd always had kind of yearnings for traveling. So I did a gap year in Nepal, which was extraordinary, such an amazing experience. Travel with a friend of mine from school through India up to Nepal. We were there for 5 months teaching in this remote little village.
Teaching English?
Yeah, teaching English. And then went to Thailand and went to full moon parties and did all that kind of stuff. And then I went to university in Sheffield and studied chemistry.
Your bachelor's?
Yes, yep. Well, it was an MChem, because I spent a year studying in Germany, because I'm half German. So I spent a year in Heidelberg, which is amazing, kind of just sort of reconnect to some of my family roots. And I really struggled with the whole being German thing, because I'd actually been massively bullied at school for being half German, because it was still, I guess it was like, late 70s, early 80s, there was still that kind of residue of the Second World War. And
absolutely.
I got hammered for that. So, but yes, so I had a real sort of mixed relation to my German heritage, but that was an interesting experience, and worked as a dustman over there, which I loved, in the holidays from studying. And then at Sheffield, I've always been kind of interested in writing and had done bits of writing for encyclopedias and stuff when I was at university. But I somehow won a competition that the New Scientist did for an editorial traineeship down in London. So,
okay.
I then went down to London and spent 6 months working at the New Scientist, which was an amazing experience. And I actually think I did really well. I had I got interviewed on Radio 5. I had articles that went in the Mail and all this kind of stuff, but it was given as a traineeship. And basically all they did was they gave me a desk and sat me down and said, write a story. And I had no idea what I was doing. I think I was the only one they'd ever taken on that didn't have a PhD. I was, straight out of university. So I had this huge sense of imposter syndrome. I didn't know what I was doing. And I left after this 6 months, went into book publishing, but this is all down in London. And after a while, I realized London was just too big. And again, the atmosphere, all the money, the status didn't really work for me. And then a friend of mine was in a band in Manchester, and they'd got on TV, and he was like, we'd had some jams together, and he was like, I really like what you do, and I think this would be work, and we're going to be famous because we've just been on TV. So I was like, right, fuck it. I'm going to go and I'll move up to Manchester. I'm going to be in a band. It's going to be famous. It's going to be amazing. So I moved up.
Wow.
And the fame and fortune took a bit longer than I'd anticipated, and I'm kind of still waiting. So,
well, how old were you at that particular time?
21, 22.
Oh, so already, again, similar to Paul, like by your early 20s, you've had some really, really rich, obviously some challenging experiences as well when you go back to the bullying aspect. But Paul talks about negative data, and it's interesting when you're talking about like when, you got a good sense of maybe your inner compass and values when you're talking about like when you moved to St. Albans, how you felt in that environment, and then being in London, and then coming up to the rainy city, Manchester, which we'll continue from there, please.
It's interesting. It's like you say that we might end up talking about this later, but I'm very interested in like personality systems and in human design in particular. And it's like in human design, what's called a 3-line. And that's someone that lives multiple lifetimes and multiple lifetimes within a single lifetime. So it kind of, I really resonate with that framing. But yeah, so it's in Manchester and it worked for the probation service because I realized I needed some money, and I was doing bits of writing, but I did that for about 3 years, and it was a great experience. I loved being in the band, and like many of the bands that nearly made it, we were so close. Honestly, mate, we were just that close.
So were you close?
Everyone says that. I have no idea. We had A&R people come around and stuff. I have no idea. But then But
you're playing gigs. You were having crowds.
Yeah.
What sort of crowds were you getting numbers wise?
200. Kind of. We were kind of regulars at the night and day, and we just a lot of the kind of smaller circuits that played Sheffield and moved around. So yeah, it was kind of fun. And then I realised that it probably wasn't going to happen as soon as I thought. So then I went back to university and did a master. Well, I wanted to get into IT. I discovered I loved computers, and I wanted to go into IT, but I couldn't. There was no like funded placements to do IT. But then it came up with this new course called Chem Informatics, which is looking at processing information science and chemistry. So it linked like chemistry and IT. So
okay,
I did that, and then off the back of that, I somehow got a job, Daresbury Laboratory, working in a quantum chemistry lab. So I'd done my final project on developing a very simple computational model around quantum modeling of water. And I went to this job interview. I couldn't even understand the advert. The advert was like, and all I read was like chemistry and computers. I was like, well, I kind of know a bit about that. I'll go for that. And I went to the job interview, and it went so badly in my eyes that they got to the end and they said, do you have any questions? And I said, look, I'm not going to waste your time or my time by asking questions because it's clear that I'm not suited for this job. So I kind of, ended the interview early, and they said, do you want to see the office? I was like, well, I'm never coming back. Well, be interesting to see the lab. And then amazing, I got the job, and then I spent probably 8 years working at Daresbury Laboratory developing.
Hold on a minute. So how mad the fact that you thought that it went so badly, you've already wrote it off. Like, that's it, I'm done, stop the interview early. And then you got the job and you were there for 8 years?
Yeah. I know in America. I mean, to be fair, I've no idea how many people applied. Maybe it was just me, but then I spent 8 years at Daresbury Laboratory. It was just such an interesting experience working in quantum chemistry, I basically picked the hardest. I really wanted to kind of push myself scientifically and mathematically and learn what I could do. And it was so hard. I was the only person in the building without a PhD working in quantum chemistry. And then we hosted the UK supercomputer and I was support for that. So
you said a UK supercomputer.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop you at certain parts of the interview, because there'll be people who are listening to this interview who may not know what certain things are.
Yeah.
So like quantum chemistry for one, maybe if you could, I mean, it's possibly impossible to say what quantum chemistry is in 2 sentences, but if you could, what is it? And then talk about the UK supercomputer and the fact that it's in Daresbury and Warrington, not too far away, or was.
So quantum chemistry is basically using quantum theory, which is a theory of the very, very small, and about kind of how energy and electric fields move, and applying it to kind of the molecules of matter, of life, and understanding how they react. Because if you just think of atoms as little balls and springs, you can't really explain why and how they react. But quantum theory allows you to start looking at how and why they react and how the electrons move. And,
okay,
and
makes sense.
So working in supercomputing, in quantum chemistry, and but I always had this kind of, imposter syndrome that I was the only person pretty much on site that didn't have a PhD. And I thought, I don't really know what I'm doing. They must all think I'm terrible. They never actually fired me. And then I met this amazing quantum chemist who was at the time one of the best in the world. But he was really nice. He was really connecting with him. And I said, I think I'm doing a PhD. And he said, oh, you should come to Australia, where he was based. And then I've been speaking to a friend of mine, Alex, who had a tea business, who's actually now on the Border Farm Urban. And he'd hitched around Australia on a boat. I don't know where I got the idea. I'd done a little bit of sailing as a kid, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to sail to Australia. I'm going to hitch on boats and see if I can get to Australia to start the PhD. And then, so I saved up, and then I left and went on this crazy trip, hitching on sailing boats.
So this happened. So you hitched on sailing boats to get to Australia?
Yeah. So
how long did it take you?
About 9 months. It was kind of the whole trip was a year, but it was kind of 9 months of being, and I mean, the whole podcast we're taking up with the stories, but I nearly sank in the middle of the Atlantic and all kinds of crazy stuff. But it was such an amazing experience I think it really taught, when you're in the middle of the ocean, like hundreds of miles from land, you're kind of out of society. You're so far out, you can't be rescued. It's like, you think, well, they'll send a boat, they'll send a helicopter. It's like, no, they won't. Because it's like, no helicopter can go that far. There's no boat going to go there. They'd have to divert a tanker. And there's no, a tanker's not going to come and search for you. So you're completely without the safety net of society. And you're in this tiny little boat, completely beholden to the elements. And it's beautiful, and it's awe-inspiring. It's scary as well. And it's psychologically, it's a very interesting thing. It's why very few, you often get, couples decide to buy a boat and sail across an ocean, and often by the end of the first crossing, the marriage is over, because it's such an intense experience. So it was an extraordinary experience, and I ended up all the way, down through the Pacific, and got down to New Zealand, and got to New Zealand, and then I was there for less than 48 hours because my best mate was getting married and I was the best man. So having got all the way down to New Zealand, I then flew back.
You flew back to the UK?
Yeah.
Oh my good Lord.
But on the trip, I'd met this guy called Magnus, who was an amazing Swedish guy who...
If you're going to be Swedish, you're going to be called Magnus.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Magnus was great. But I met him, and he was such an interesting character, and he'd sailed across the Atlantic as well. I met him when I was on that trip and on that leg, and he was like, he'd cycled the entire lengths from North America to South America. And he was like, I want to go do it again, but go back up the other way on horseback. And I was like, have you ridden before? He went, yeah, a couple of times, it'll be fine. So we arranged that we would then do this trip. So I went back to the UK, went back to work. Amazingly, they took me back on. So I spent a year working, saved the money, and then went out to Magnus in Argentina. We worked with a farrier, learned about horses. Then we bought horses and tried to...
We actually bought the horse?
Yeah, we had 3 horses, and then we started this trek. We lasted 2 weeks for various reasons, and then we ended up stopping, and then I ended up living on a long story, but living on this remote ranch in Argentina, house sitting for an American lady who had to travel back to America, but this ranch, you could only get in by horseback. So it was like a day's ride by horse. And I ended up being snowed in there, and at points was the only person in the valley. So there were no humans within kind of a day's travel. And that was such an extraordinary experience in itself, being
Isolated.
utterly isolated. But again, such a gift and such a powerful experience. And then
Just hold on a minute. Because this, it's like you're talking as if like, oh yeah, I've just been in the shops to get a packet of crisps. Mate, you've been on horseback. First of all, you've sailed all the way to New Zealand by boat, nearly died. Then you've ended up back, bought horses in the south of Argentina, lasted 2 weeks, and then you've ended up on this remote farm in Argentina, isolated in this valley, snowed in. Like, again, like that, a feeling of being at the mercy of the element. Like, can you talk to that a little bit more about like what the essence of that experience is about? You know, when you're isolated, you're on your own, you're completely vulnerable. Like, what's that experience like? And then how did it shape you in any way? If you could share some of that, please. Because that's like really rich experience.
it is. It's really interesting. I mean, the interesting thing was that I never ever felt alone, which really intrigues me. Whether that, you could, maybe those are internal psychological structures that, diverse systems where you have, internal parts. Maybe there were parts that were keeping each other company, or maybe I just always had a connection to something else. I never felt lonely. And I also saw how much of my internal processes and what I was going through were due to me, because I'd often get stressed and think I wasn't working hard enough. And I was like, what? Like, who cares? There's nothing to do. But I had this, like, I don't know, Puritan work ethic. Who knows where we get it from? It was just like, I should be doing stuff. I need to be like, I don't know why I thought.
In you.
Yeah. It was like, so I used to like go and just do stuff around the house, and, and I used to get up at, particularly, one of my regrets about that is that I never just let time go. I just really wonder what would have happened if I would have just like
Surrendered.
Completely surrendered. But, I didn't have the knowledge that I had now. But it was, being where there's no distractions and you can just really focus on yourself. I meditate quite a lot. I kind of got into that earlier. And then, I found a book on the Enneagram, the personality system. So that kind of...
That was in the house, was it?
Yeah, that was in the house. It was kind of... There were some hippies that had kind of, spent there. So it was... I guess I'd started my spiritual journey by that point. So it really gave me the opportunity to connect to nature, this beautiful nature, but again, also experience the kind of what it was like to be outside the safety net. A few times I was out on my horse, kind of riding places, and nearly got thrown. And I was, oh my God, if I fall and bang my head, I'm done. It's like no one knows.
Nobody knows
where I am, and it's But again, it's just you don't really think in those terms. It was just, I guess, it's very present a lot of the time, which is quite a real gift.
So it's there's almost like a spiritual quality to it, where there's almost like feels like a hermit-like existence, but also very monastic as well, because there was no real external influence apart from nature itself. There's no if you think about that compared to living in London, for example, it's the complete polar opposite. And how old were you at this particular time?
Oh gosh, I would have been, I guess, in my early 30s.
Early 30s.
Maybe.
So how long were you there for?
I was in the valley for 9 months.
Alone? For most of that time?
I was probably like fully alone for about a month.
Okay, sure. Okay.
But then after that, people came in. And actually, it's kind of, that's in a way sort of where part of the farm urban journey started, because then some humans started coming into the valley, and they would run various stuff there, and they had some permaculture teachers came in there. So this extraordinary woman called Sarah came in, American permaculture teacher. She's just, such a beautiful human. And her being is permaculture. So, and she trained with a lot of the kind of people that created it. And I had...
Let me stop you there. Yeah. Permaculture. What is it?
So I guess it's a suite of systems of how we live in alignment with nature. So it's often characterized as just, organic gardening techniques and organic building techniques, but it's much, much more. It's how do we live in alignment with nature and like with the flows and dynamics of energy of natural systems, so that we are aligned with them. I see it now in quite a spiritual way. I don't know how much of that is actually was there from the beginning, but it's a very beautiful system of how you work with natural systems for efficiencies. You know, one example is that when you have a building, you have a big window, but then you put a lake out the front, and that means you can grow different types of crops. But then there's this over in the summer it cools, but in the winter, if you align the building and the light right, it then refracts the winter sunlight into the house, so it then warms it, and then you can have
cool.
thermal walls at the back that so it's all these kind of clever techniques that allow you to very efficiently and beautifully live and work with these natural systems around you. So yeah, kind of people started coming in. I met Sarah, and she was such a, formed a really great friendship, and she's just taught me so much, but kind of through her being, like how she was. I was looking after a dog at the time, and this dog used to drive me nuts. It was, when I first I absolutely hated it, and by the end of it, I was sobbing my heart out when I had to leave because I so fallen in love with him. But at the time, I couldn't control him, and Sarah just came in, and she would just, again, very permaculture, she would sit back and she would just observe. She would see what and how he was doing, and she just learned how to work with him and how to,
read his behaviour
and just work with him, and like not push, not force, but just guide his energy so that it was kind of more in alignment with what how we could function together. So that was powerful. And then I came back to the UK, and I met a girl before I left who was in Liverpool, and she was doing a PhD. Yeah. And then I came back to Liverpool and decided I would do this PhD that I'd always thought I'd do, and that I originally thought I'd do in Australia. So then I did the PhD at Liverpool, looking at kind of protein structure and crystallography and various bits and bobs. And then, but that's where I met Paul, and that's kind of then where the sort of farm urban journey kind of started.
Wow. It actually blows me away, that story, or that collection of stories. I mean, we've barely scratched the surface, but you already can see like the richness of that life experience and how it's unfolded, and the variety, from the travel, the sailing, that wayfinding sort of way about you, just exploring the music. Imagine if you had a sliding doors moment and you think that if that band would have been signed, how life would have been different. But then you've got this whole academic track that you were on, but then going back to like when you were younger, the challenges of being of mixed heritage, and the legacy of the Second World War, and how that, meant that you had quite maybe an adverse experience, as a young man, or a young boy, in school. So let's draw the line there for a minute, and then we can touch on farm urban. But I just wanted to share with the listeners is that, like, me and Jens have a lot of conversations, and this is very much a farm urban philosophy around, we when we're in the office, or when we're out and about, or even just when we're together, like me and you, we go really, really deep and really, really wide, and are able to synthesize lots of different themes and lots of different subjects. And it's a very rich conversation. And before we started this interview, we sort of agreed, and like this happens with every interview that I do with the Pool of Life podcast, is that it's a very, very emergent conversation. So now that we've got a sense of sort of where you are, and we can talk maybe about the diamond approach, the spiritual philosophical system that you are part of and work with, is that we will just allow this conversation to be. I've got no set questions, and we will just respond to what emerges. And there's many different things I'd like to talk about, but let's just see.
Yeah, it's interesting that really, so I could almost feel as I was talking about my past. On the one part, I'm really proud, and the old me was kind of, I defined myself through what I'd done, and I was like, oh, you should listen to me because I'm interesting because I've done all these things. And now I'm really kind of, it's almost a bit boring. It's like, I know that, I've done that. I'm so grateful for it. It's contributed to the richness of my life and who I am. But it's like, I want to explore now this, I want to explore the unknown. I know that. I want to step into the unknown. And you mentioned the diamond approach, which is a sort of, a spiritual school I've been in for a long time. It's sort of a mixture of psychology, Sufism, Buddhism. It's sort of hard to explain, but one of the fundamental practices in there is inquiry, where you just inquire, you explore your internal process, you ask yourself questions, and you just, you feel into the body, what's present, where am I? And then you follow where that guides you. And when you do it properly, you don't know what's happening and where it's going to end up. And you surprise yourself with what comes out of you. And you start realizing that, oh my God, I'm a mystery to myself. Like, I don't know where this is going to go. I want to explore. And when you started saying we were going to, move into this tack, instantly I could feel, my whole energy has shifted. I'm open, I'm excited, and I'm really kind of, I'm quite vulnerable and nervous. I don't know where it's going to go, but it's like, I love that not knowing. I think actually that's one of the real things that I've learned over time, is that not knowing it's really difficult a lot of the time, but it's so exciting when you don't know what's can happen. But you need the trust to let that unfold. Even when it's difficult, it's like that trust to okay, let's see where life wants to go, what presents itself, and can I be open and receptive to that, and let it guide me. And having someone like you, it's one of our first conversation, I was like, wow, this guy is something special. And you're so interested. I don't think many, people love talking about themselves, but what I love about you is that you're so interested in the other, and there's such a joy and an excitement and a real thirst to learn and to explore. And it's just beautiful to be around that. But I think that's why conversations are like they are.
Yeah. It is a genuine passion of mine is to be curious and to learn. And there's always like a beginner's mind, around. There's always something to learn and to be open to that. And, the way you described that approach, that not knowing, in modern Western culture, and I speak that in a general sense, it is countercultural to be that way.
Yeah.
To not know. When you think about like a standard business, for an example, if you've got a family, it's like everything's planned to a T, structure, like finance, like everything's like laid out. But like we live in a very complex world, think about your background, working on maybe with complexity. It's like we don't know what's going to happen in, what time is it now? It's 4:00 on a Sunday afternoon. We don't know what's going to happen at 4:05. Do you know what I mean? So to be able to hold oneself in a particular state, we think about like Buddhists, you mentioned Buddhism, to cultivate present moment awareness, and all that is important, maybe the wrong word, but all that matters is now. What is arising in this moment? And we respond to that. So as an example, I've just heard some people in the distance, and so there's children, and it might interfere with the recording. So I'm going to respond to that, and we're going to turn around as an example, but just to give you the working understanding about all we can respond to is what's happening now. How is that for you? And could you talk a little bit more about that, and working with that energy, that emergence in your experience?
I mean, I've had some kind of very powerful experiences on retreats and stuff of just realizing that life just wants to unfold. There's this incredible joy in life exploring itself and learning about itself. And it's like, it's an endless discovery of life discovering itself. And I think it's a kind of like, we are part of the internal evolution of the universe, of life. It's not like Tim Freak, who's a kind of, I guess, spiritual teacher. They gave listened to a little podcast he did a few, probably last year, and he spoke so beautifully about how like we sometimes have this idea that there's this God, this kind of thing that sits outside of our experience is somehow controlling and manipulating this. And he explained, this idea that actually there's not anything. We are all part of that. We are literally the universe exploring itself, and it just wants to flow and play and uncover. And so often we get out of that. There's a fear. Who knows where it comes from? But there's a fear and a desire to control because we don't trust. So we try and we try all kinds of ways to manipulate and control that process. And knowledge is often a way that we do that. It's like, if I learn enough stuff, if I can understand enough stuff, then I can start to predict and I can start to control, and then I can get a grip on this. But in that, you're starting to squeeze and restrict life into the past, because it's like knowledge it's kind of past. And Ra, who created the human design system, speaks of how we're going into a post-knowledge era. And that would have terrified me before, but now
as a scientist, you mean?
Yeah, I fucking love that, because there's knowledge is like, it's dead. It's gone. It's not relevant to the moment, because no matter how much you've learned, in the next moment, it may not be relevant. If I take a step forward, it's like, and suddenly there's a big hole. The fact that I've got knowledge that previously it was like the floor was secure, it's just not going to help me. I'm going to fall down a big hole. So, and with that AI and the emergence of AI, which is able to sort of pool and assimilate knowledge, it's like having a bucket load of knowledge is not really that. There are other things that can deal with knowledge better, but there's nothing that can be fully present and alive and responsive to the moment as life can, as humans can, as animals can. It's just a beautiful, I think maybe a blue tick just flew across us, that they're just fully present and I think just enjoy. I mean, it's like when you take the Darwinian, it's like that's just calling out because they want to get laid, and it's like it was about food and territory. It's like, oh my God, it's such a desolate, dark view. Not that there's not some truth in it, but it's like you miss just the, I can now hear the joy and the rapture and the communication that comes from the bird song.
By staying open.
Yeah, even a few years ago that would have been nuts to me, but it's like now it's like, my God, I can just see how you can shut that out, and it's so sad and so painful when you see that, what we do to ourselves. Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned now, which I feel underpins what you're talking about, and there's many, many different things that will underpin it, but it's the lack of trust and maybe a lack of safety in what will or can unfold as part of this emergent process of, here we are, we're in this beautiful natural place. You won't be able to hear this on the podcast, but there's just beautiful birds singing everywhere. It's peaceful, and trust in life enough to stay open enough that all needs will be met at all times, rather than trying to control through scarcity, through lack of trust. And how that is essentially the fundamental operating system of, it's a very gross oversimplification of how people operate on a day-to-day in the general sense of life. Because again, going back to that countercultural approach of being present in the moment, staying open, receiving, being able to hear, and just allowing yourself to blend and connect into the environment, it's a rare thing.
Yeah, I'm so grateful as part of the Diamond Approach. You have a theme per retreat, and one of the retreats we focused on was basic trust. So it's literally a whole week fully exploring how do I trust life? What does that actually mean? What is it to have a basic trust in life, and looking at how I do and how I don't.
What does that look like for you? So to have a basic trust, first of all, what an incredible way to spend a week together in a group as a theme of inquiry. What is basic trust and how does that show up? So, I'm conscious that you may not want to go into that too deeply from a personal point of view, but what sort of themes came up as what basic trust actually is for you to be able to function in a healthy, balanced, harmonious way within life? That's a big question.
Yeah, it is. So it's interesting, like what came up for, like, basic trust is, I just trust that this is going to sound a bit hippie, but the universe loves us and it wants us to, because we're part of it, it just wants us to thrive and to explore and to learn, to evolve. But that's been a very long journey for me to get to that. I remember when one of the things I came up with in the retreat was, I know, again, as Paul does, and I've learned so much from him, such an extraordinarily beautiful human being, but I really struggle with a gratitude practice, which I now kind of really try and connect to every day. But I was remember when I first looked at these things, I was like, are you fucking kidding? Like, grateful, trust. Because it's, I mean, just, you know, my mum's first child died when she was pregnant with me. So it's like, you know, again, through doing a lot of therapy, I realized that I was, from before the get-go, I was in the most horrific trauma you can imagine, because it's like that happening to someone, and then you're in that
environment
with the anguish of that, and then coming into a family where that's happened. And, you know, there's a whole story I could play out, which is, I guess the story I was in is like, you know, how brutal, uncaring the world is, and nature red in tooth and claw. And again, I mean, I love him. He's one of the most astonishing people. But, you know, David Attenborough, I think wildlife films have a big kind of part of a problem for a lack of basic trust, because when you watch nature films, it's like, what you see is like the money shot. It's like you see when the cheetah kills the gazelle, and it's like you keep seeing all the dreadful things that happen when animals kill each other and this, that, and the other. But when you're out in nature and you look around, like, what animals do most of the time? They're just chilling. They're having fun. They're playing. They're like, you know, the zebras and the lions, they hang out together. You know, they're like, the zebras look at the lions and, well, he's eating. This ain't a problem. And it's so much of like life is play, but it's a perspective, and it's shifting that perspective. And I was in where I just was so focused on all the negatives. It's, you know, like watching a nature wildlife film, all you see is where the things are ripping each other to shreds. Whereas, you know, if you flipped it the other way, and it's just all you see is the animals playing, rolling around, like, you know, making love, like, you know, it's like that neither is right or wrong, but it's like where you put your attention and what you fill your consciousness with. And particularly nowadays with social media and normal media, we saturate our consciousness with that stuff. And then you wonder that it has an impact on you.
That's a whole other podcast episode in and of itself, because it's true, you know, how we make sense of the world and sense makers through what we see and what we hear in the main. You could argue what we feel as well. But, you know, when you talk about social media, and, you know, when we're looking at a phone, and you said before we come on the interview about, you know, the doom scrolling, how that's altering our psychology about how we see the world, but in a very intense, on steroids type process. Whereas maybe before you'd read the Mail on Sunday. Now the intensity at which we are consuming information of that kind requires us to be, I don't know, not disciplined, but discerning around what we put in our brains, because that shapes our reality, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, we shape our reality. I'm very blessed to have an extraordinary partner, Sabrina,
She is special.
She's an extraordinary. I mean, she's a psychologist and one of the most amazing therapists I've ever encountered. But she can literally recode the structure of reality, the energetics. You know, kind of what we are able to manifest. We are powerful manifesting beings. We create our own reality. You can sort of explain it in a simple way through kind of psychology. It's just, you know, positive thinking or negative thinking, what you create. But actually, it's much, much deeper than that. It's like, well, we are energetic beings of light that are structuring this reality. But it's like the intent and the energy that we put into the world and what we can create is, you know, we really need to cultivate and look after ourselves. And Sabrina's work is literally about removing those blocks and helping us to get on the true alignment with who and what we are. And there are these distortions and things that push us off, and, you know, and you can, now I just feel the energy. If I look at the tabloids, the Daily Mail or something like that, or it's just like my whole body now is like, oh my God, it's like I can feel the toxic nature of it. And it's like, I mean,
but it's a frequency, no?
Yeah, it's a frequency. Yeah. And who knows where it comes from or why, but it's there. And it's like, but we have that ability to discern and discriminate and choose where we put our attention and our intention. Yeah. And I think that for me there's a whole thing about, you know, do we have agency? And, you know, there's a whole philosophical debate about that. But I think the one thing that we do have some control over is our intention and our where we orientate ourselves. And it's like, if you orientate yourself towards openness, towards love, towards compassion and acceptance, and you step out of fear, it's, my God, the world just starts to change in the experiences. The world then starts to respond, and synchronicities arrive, and stuff starts feeling effortless and in flow. And you're like, wow, my experience of life now is very, very different from what it was, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it's constantly evolving.
What that speaks of to me is the fact that you've been able to create a feedback loop on life that enabled you to instill and cultivate trust in what you are seeing as maybe outcomes from this inner change that you've been making within yourself, when obviously maybe what you've shared through with your partner, you're able to see the result of some of these intention and actions playing out, where it does instill that trust. Oh, this does work. This is actually true.
Yeah, there's a really interesting thing that I've been so blessed with people that I've been around, and one of my oldest friends is got me to Design Approach, and he trained with human design with Ra, and it was kind of, so I've had this kind of support. And actually, Christine Gibbons, who was your first interviewee, she was again she was a really powerful step on my journey. I met her in Liverpool and went to. She was kind of my shamanic teacher for a while. An extraordinary woman, the best.
Proper scouser as well.
Proper scouser, yeah. You don't get many scout charm, but oh my God, she's great. But that, and again, I think I wouldn't have been able to be with Sabrina without having met Chris and had those opportunities. But I think a lot of those kind of support points help me, because, and I actually believe that like we are going through this enormous shift. And I think you and Claire mentioned, the Kali Yugas and the
Claire Lewis, you mean in the previous episode, yeah.
And the Mayans have like this date of 2012, and it's like, you can get caught up in like, oh, well, they say 2012, they say 2027, they say 2026. So they're clear all the nonsense. It's like, come on, these are like epochal events.
Evolutionary shifts, in collective society.
It doesn't happen on a kind of on a clock thing. It's
okay,
like
today it's going to happen. That's it. Someone's flicked the switch and we've shifted.
So it's like we're going through these shifts, but I actually believe that we were. And you can see it. My sort of computer brain goes. It's like we've gone from one operating system to another operating system, and I think
we had an upgrade.
Yeah, and it's like and it's more than an upgrade. It's the operating system has changed, which is different. It's like, okay. So what happened was, and I think we are sort of transitional beings that are here to go through this transition from one age to another. And the honest truth is, like, before, I always had these intentions and tried to do stuff, and the honest truth is, it didn't work. Like all this stuff I was doing.
Scientifically, you mean?
Well, no, the kind of intention I had, like the idea of farm urban and like what that was, would not, and it didn't really work back in the early days.
Okay.
Actually, it took Sabrina doing some energy work with us as a company, which is fascinating itself. But that was a big part of shifting. But the stuff just didn't work because it was like the operating system was wrong. Those programs did not work. You could not be in openness, in vulnerability, in the abundance mindset, all this stuff. It was like the operating system was different. But I think now we've been through the shift, and now we're on a different operating system.
As a company.
Oh, well, no, as a
society.
As a society, as reality, the operating system has shifted. And it's like suddenly we're still, most of the programs that around us, the thought forms, are of the old scarcity mindset of individualism, of, like
clearly playing out. Yeah.
But the crazy thing is the programs now start to work. I'm suddenly seeing it. I'm like,
what was an example?
Well, I said farm urban is a great one. Of like, I was always like very anti-business and anti-capitalism. I'm still not a big fan of capitalism, but business is just about making money, and it's screwing up the environment, and it's like exploiting people, and it's like
extractive. Yeah.
Yeah. What would it be like to have a company that nurtures and supports people and planet and loves the people inside of it? And it's like a family.
Which is definitely what farm urban is.
100%. And it's like, but the idea of that, and could that company make a lot of money and be able to really richly reward the people that work for it, and do it from doing something good in the world? And, like that would have been like cloud cuckoo land fantasy back then. It's like, what? But now that is becoming starting to become a reality. It's been a very hard journey for us because I think we were literally doing it over the transition. So I think I'm sure there are lots of other companies that are in a similar place are carrying that frequency.
But you started in 2013, so we think about, like, say, let's use, because Claire talked about 2012, that's 2013. So Farm Urban's been going for
12 years.
12 years now. So we just wanted to just highlight that for people who are listening. So, like, just for about Farm Urban, to enable us not go into the story of Farm Urban, I really encourage people who are listening to this to listen to the episode with Paul, and Paul will go more into, in that interview, he went into the detail of what Farm Urban is, because I want to stay on this thread.
Yeah.
And so it almost gives another flavour to the operating system of Farm Urban, of what it is, the incredible organisation it is. So please continue, Jens.
Yeah, well, I think it's really that. It's like the things that were no longer possible are becoming possible, and ways of being that were like not available to us are becoming available. And that to me is so exciting. It enables us to create and imagine a world that is, who knows what that's like, but it's a completely different way of structuring a world. And I really believe that. I don't believe in, there's a thinker called Jeremy Rifkin that really inspired me, which this idea of like shifting from top-down hierarchical models and the energetic structures that are very centralized to sort of decentralized spoken hub models that are much more scalable, actually much more resilient, much more powerful.
In the social systems or in business systems?
In all systems. It's across everything. The paradigm is exemplified by the internet, where you don't have, it's not like a TV station where you have a very big, expensive, high energy thing that's beaming out and you have one central place that's going out. It's like lots of these small nodes that are like functioning together. And to me, that's like, the trouble is we've built structures as humans that are not optimized for humans. Like these huge organizations and these huge things, that's not how humans function. They are not viable anymore. And it's like, we work much better socially, business, politically, if it's small communities collaborating with each other. And the amazing thing is, with the internet and all these kind of technologies that come along, that's now become possible on a global scale, that these entities, whatever they are, whether they're political, whether they're social, whether they're business, can start to cooperate. And then there's like the possibility of change and transformation and adaptation and resilience and working in harmony with nature. And, the idea that like cities would almost kind of start melding away, and we would just go back to almost like living in, smaller communities in beautiful settings, but be able to connect with other humans in all these different places. And that really that's always kind of been the vision that's sort of been behind what I've done. And, for me, Farm Urban's always been a sort of an expression of my, I guess, spiritual awakening in a way. So it's so reassuring to see that it's starting to make more sense now, and it's starting to develop structure, and it's starting to, there are so many other, organizations and people and that are starting to pop up that make me think, oh, this could
happen.
Yeah.
One of the aspects about Farm Urban, and there's a couple of points that I'll make, is the fact that it's been a slow, okay, let me change that language, that's not helpful. It's grown in a way that I believe, compared to other organizations of its type, in a very sustainable way, where, when you look at a lot of other organizations that maybe operate on a commercial level in this sort of field, it's like like other businesses, like get investment in there, just grow it, like just smash it, let's just grow it over 5-7 years, and then let's just exit, sell out and move on to something else. Whereas this has been a slow process. That's how nature works.
Yeah.
Nature works in seasons and natural cycles, and it evolves and it grows. And that's like, when I see Farm Urban, it adheres for me to that way of being that's more harmonious with nature than what it would be to like a traditional commercial organization. So it's and for me, that creates like that resilience, that longevity, the opportunity to be able to develop systems and experiment. And it's a very beautiful organization, and I could wax lyrical about it all day. I love it. But what I want to touch on as well is is like, what do you see collectively happening where these models that you talk about of societal structures and ways of living and ways of being, what's that in a response to? And I mean, I state the obvious, and maybe some people listening to this could already know what we're referring to, why these things would need to come in. But could you give the people who are listening a sense of what you perceive is happening collectively within society? And we can name Trump or climate change. Like, what is going on that this would be a response to?
Oh, actually, I'll go with what kind of like
Please.
So when you're talking, you're saying about, companies getting an exit, and actually, it's interesting for me. Like, what's that about? Like, why do you want to like, you kind of kill yourself going into business, and people that set up these, they're in this like 24/7, and they don't see their families. They're just doing this. Then it's like, to like get this exit. And then it's like, but why you want the exit? So you got the money. Well, why do you want the money? Like, well, so you can go and, have this lifestyle. It's like, so really it's about trying to achieve a feeling and trying to get something. It's like, well, what if you didn't need to kill yourself and exploit yourself in order to get that? What if we could create structures, and what if we could create a society where that was here anyway? There's no reason that can't be. Like, these systems and societies we built they're human constructs. And with farm urban, it's like the reason it's grown like it has is because we said this in the beginning. It's like we draw inspiration from the plants, from the seeds that they grow. You don't pull a plant up, you nurture it and you support it. And farm urban's been slow in its evolution because it's been putting down roots. You've been cultivating the soil and the mycorrhizal networks, the links, and it's been a long, long journey, but it now feels like it's got those roots, and that it's in this nourishing deep soil,
the healthy soil,
that's going to allow it to grow and evolve. And to speak to what it's in response to, I think what we're seeing is, it's interesting. Like, you can look at the world around you and you can see, oh my God, it's fucked. We are going to hell in a handcart. It's like the society is falling apart, structures are breaking down, and it's like, on one level I believe that, but I actually believe it's because what you're seeing is the old structures that work with the old operating system are basically realizing on some deep unconscious level that the operating system has changed and they are no longer evolutionarily viable. It's like, this does not work anymore. That way of being just does not work in the world. And actually what you're seeing is that they're louder, they are more kind of in the face, but it's because of that there's a fear that actually the structures are breaking down and things are going to change. And the old me would have political, been in the sort of revolution idea that we need to like destroy and bring down everything. And I really don't believe that. I think what we're doing is we are creating building the structures in these companies, in these organizations. People all over the world are like, that are in this, what my girlfriend called the New Earth way. We are building New Earth structures that are going to support this transition. And it doesn't need to be an almighty cataclysmic crash where everything collapses. And then, there's a real sort of thing to that, the second coming and the kind of Armageddon. I don't know where that's thinking, but it still has a powerful grip on us. And we're still in that. Is
that a religious slant? Is that a religious frame on looking at things?
Yeah. And there's almost this, you see it a lot in kind of a lot of the American political thinking. There's this kind of, almost relish in the idea of a kind of like everything being destroyed and, the good and evil. And it's like, I just don't think that's how it needs to be and how it works. And this is part of like creating the reality of like, well, I'm inhabiting a reality and I can see it getting closer and closer where it's like these structures will just fall apart. But at the same time as they're falling apart, we are building this new Earth, these new ways of being, these new ways of relating, these win-win systems, these programs that operate on this new operating system that are able to then support us. And it's like, there doesn't need to be a cataclysm. It's just, there's a transition. And the thing is, through that, we're creating a world that benefits everyone. It's like, if this work needs to work for Donald Trump as much as for anyone else, like, he's another human. I may not agree with a lot of what he does and says, but it's like, the world we need to embrace and include everything and everyone. We need to create a world that everyone can express themselves, their genius, their joy, their passion. Like, that's what we're creating.
There's a great book that, because I'm now living in a very different life nomadically, a lot of the books but my whole library collection is in storage. And there's a book in there that I'd started to read, not to put away. It's called Hospicing Modernity.
Oh, wow. I still have the title.
And it's a Brazilian lady. I can't remember the author's name, but that's very much what she's talking about. Whereas, like, if you look at natural systems or anything within life, it's born, it grows, it matures, then it dies. And it's just on a constant cycle. So when you're talking about systems, all what's happening, I believe, is like, and what from hearing from you, is that this is just a natural process. These systems, these operating systems, have outlived. They've completed their usefulness, and all they're doing is just the dying. And it's like, we just got to help them compost, and then help bring the new into being. And it's just a constant cycle that's happened evolutionarily throughout society. Does that resonate, or am I off the mark there?
No, completely. And actually, as soon as you said that, I felt a real upwelling of almost grief. And it's interesting, like, talking about death, which is, something that's very out with our culture. We're not very comfortable with talking about death and what that might mean. And I'm very kind of fortunate that I've got friends that are death doulas and people that are very comfortable in that space. And, having just turned 50, it's like people are getting older, people are dying, and you kind of, death starts to kind of, you start to walk into you can see the embrace of death is getting closer, but you start to, it's like you can fight and you can rage against death, or you can, like I said, see it as the fundamental thing that enables the process, and embrace grief, like, because grief is an expression of love. Like, we mourn and grieve so deeply for what we love, and it's an expression of love. But you also have to let stuff go and move on and evolve so that it can explore and it can evolve. Like anything that's in aspic and frozen. I've got this feeling like Lenin in his tomb. It's like, it's just let it compost, let it go, let it nourish let us learn from it, let it nourish the next iteration, the next generation. Like embrace those cycles, learn to kind of love them, because it's actually so much of what we do is, I think, I don't know if I'm maybe sort of misquoting Freud, but misquoting Freud, but Thanatos, the death instinct. So much of what we're trying to do on one level is to free stuff and stop it changing. But that's actually death. That's like when everything stops. But death is like, it's the doorway that opens and allows stuff to
come in,
and it's like, yeah, it's yeah.
I'm glad that this emerged. When we were holding this conversation in a very emergent way, and I'm really glad that this has come up. I am actually on a 4-week grief course at the moment. So,
wow.
So one of my amazing mentors through Family Constellations is a wonderful woman called Ricky, based in Dublin, and she's taken us through this 4-week process. And I'm really interested in her. He was an African shaman, Maladoma Somé, very well known within the mythopoetic movement with men's work in the 80s. And he talks about, like, in the West, that we forgot how to end well and to honor death and to grieve fully. So you mentioned about that feeling, that grief. People don't like it. It's like there's like a taboo around, like, death and grief, but it's a perfectly natural process. Like, if there's one thing that's certain, everything's going to die. And with death comes grief. And so it's just a natural process and you can't avoid it. So it's better to move through it. But we've lost a literacy around what grief actually is. And it's not taboo. And it's a perfectly normal reaction to something that is dying, no matter how big or how small.
To me, it kind of echoes back to a bit what you're saying about consciousness. Because as I'm talking, I can really feel grief in my body. And it actually fully, because, my mum died recently, my aunt died even more recently. And it's like grief is like, when you hold it in your body, like, actually, as I hold it now, it's not, it's like, it's welcome. It's like, it's not I won't go fast say pleasurable, but it's like I'm fully in it and fully inhabiting it. And but we fight back, we push against it because it's, which is understandable because on some level it can be deeply
Painful.
uncomfortable. And it's kind of, you have to go through certain, it's like, but it's when you contract against it, so, which is the way that the ego works, it's where ego structures work. When you contract against, actually you intensify and you make it worse.
Yeah.
It's more painful.
Yeah.
When you relax and allow and submit, it's like, I love Islam. It means submission. I think that there's a lot of wisdom in there, but it's like when you submit, and it's like, actually there's like beauty in the diamond approach you talk about, you then connect to the true essence that underlies it, which is, it's really, it's just, you're just allowing what is to unfold. But oh my God, is that difficult?
It's really interesting because I had this very same conversation this morning with a dear friend, Lokendra, who is a very Scouse man who went and lived in India with Sadhguru for many, many years. He's now back in the city, and I will interview him in a future episode. But we talked about, as a thing, it's so simple, and you can explain it in one sentence, but in practice, wow. I mean, it's so hard. It's so hard. It takes years to be able to trust, surrender to life and allow it to move through oneself and to be able to respond. It's like, wow, yeah, it's hard.
And by the same token, to not judge and not shame ourselves for when we don't.
Yeah.
Because we always don't. We always, and it's kind of part of the kind of being in this realm, being a human in this realm, is to forget. And, there are many people that have spoken to the idea that, it's like we are kind of reality going through the process of forgetting and then remembering. And I was thinking, maybe it was you anyway, but I just think the word remembering, it's
remembering,
like, you can, you split it as in remember, it's to become a member of again. So it's like we remember, we forget that we are part of an intimate, part of one. And it's like, quantum mechanically, where everything is entangled with everything else. Like a thought you have here affects the farthest atom at the other side of the universe because it's all entangled.
Is that the butterfly effect, is it? Is that the butterfly effect? No,
that's chaos theory. This is quantum entanglement. But basically, if everything came from a big bang, everything is entangled. That literally means everything affects everything else. So it's like, but we forget and then we remember, but you can't remember unless you've forgotten. And I'm great.
Wow.
Beat myself up so often when I'm like, oh my God, what did I just do? I was unconscious. I was a complete date for my girlfriend. Yeah. It's like, I shouldn't have done that. I did, and it's like, and we really beat ourselves up. And again, the Dine approach is great for superego work. I've done so much work on the superego, and you see that how those structures of shame and of
self-criticism,
how they like keep us in those old patterns, which we needed. Again, it's like it's learning to not, it's learning to love and understand. It's like, oh, of course I did that. I did that because I had to. That's how I had to function in my childhood. I couldn't do any other.
Which is great to sort of, again, make a point of, because, with the family constellations work and looking at family systems, it's like a good starting point for working on oneself is your family system, because of the way that we are now, as very much being influenced and informed by how we were as children, now with that environment that we grew up in,
Oh God, yeah.
There's a lady called, I'm sure you know who she is. She's now passed recently, Joanna Macy.
Oh, Sabrina, my girlfriend did her the what's it called, the work that wants to something or other.
The work that reconnects.
Yeah, so she trained in that. Yeah,
but she spent time in Tibet with Tibetan masters, Buddhist masters, and one of the masters that she worked with or worked under talked about the concept of Shambhala warrior, and the Shambhala warrior, and what the Shambhala warrior's purpose, especially in this modern society, to create change, is to have compassion and to have insight. So when things happen, and it's so simple, but it's so profound because you're breaking cycles. When something happens to you, or you do something that maybe has a negative effect, you cultivate compassion for that, but then also cultivate insight about why that might be and allow it to be, and it breaks the cycle. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's really profound to break those cycles. But I'm just conscious of the time, and I want to start to bring this to a close. And I can't believe that we've been talking for like an hour and 10 minutes. I feel like I've only been talking for 10 minutes. And so today is Imbolc, which is a cross-quarter festival in the traditional calendar of these isles. And we're just heading to a very sacred well where we are in Dibbinsdale Woods, called St. Patrick's Well, which originally would have been pagan. And yeah, it's a real blessing and a pleasure to be in nature as we see nature and spring starting to come into effect. So, when this gets published and people listen to this, what I always would like to do with guests is maybe to share something like a practice or a reflection that people can take away that's maybe quite apt for the time that we're in. So if there's anything that you'd like to share as a takeaway for the times that we're in, over to you.
It's interesting. The first thing that came to me, I knew you were going to ask this, and I had various ideas, but actually the first thing that popped into my head was kindness. Be kind. Be kind to yourself. Be kind when you fuck up, as we inevitably all do, and be kind to others for when they fuck up, and particularly when they hurt us, because that's really, really hard when someone has hurt you, and to forgive and be kind. It's really hard. I'm not speaking as someone that can do this all the time. It's like it's an intention, and it's a kind of an orientation. But I think just kindness is a really great place to kind of start from, and kindness and gratitude. Actually, that's again hard. I really, really struggle with that initially, but to kind of learn to just be grateful for things, and it's a practice, and it's like, but now just I find it so easy to, not all the time, but a lot of time, to access it and just be, for this, to be in this place with you, to have this conversation. I mean, we've had many of these conversations, and they're always a gift, but the idea that it's kind of, this could impact others in some ways, who knows how. It's just so grateful for these opportunities to be here in this realm with these amazing beings, the ones that you interview on your podcast. It's like that there's so much to be grateful for. And I'm just so grateful to be here and with you. And thank you.
No, thank you. It's a couple of great takeaways. Like you say, it's a practice. It's like building a muscle, when someone's behavior impacts on us in ways that are quite challenging, to be kind is like, as a practice, it's powerful. But then that gratitude as well. I mean, for me, like when I journal in the morning, I'll write down 3 things that I'm grateful for, but also practice that on a daily basis is really key. But my friends who I talked about, just to absolutely bring this to a close, he gifted me a book today, and it was Ram Dass's Be Here Now.
Oh yeah.
So what a way to end. So let's just be here now, and until next time, thank you, Jens.
Thank you so much, mate.